focus on lessons learned. So this is the biggest lessons learned I learned. The really when you focus on learning, not only you grow yourself, you also grow your team, and then eventually that will grow the business.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's founded and started several startups that are now 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. And today we have another great guest on the podcast. His name is Jay, and I'm probably going to massacre your last name. Is it Hsueh?
That's correct. Actually, impressive. Very impressive.
All right, do my best. So Jay started out his life in college in Taiwan, and I think you worked for a music company for a period of time, and then you moved over to the U.S. working for Philips for a period of time, and then you jumped over and went to Japan and worked, and then now you're back working at, and then you made a couple more jumps, and then bringing you up to where you're at today, working with some of your AI bots and whatnot. So that kind of gives a very brief overview. So welcome to the podcast, and thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me. This is super exciting.
So I gave a very quick overview of your journey and what you've done, but maybe if you want to back up and fill in a few of the gaps and a bit more of the details.
Yeah, sure. Happy to share that. So first of all, starting with what we are doing right now. So Robi is a software solution for a company to fully automate their help desk support for saving operational costs. So my journey starting with something completely different from what I'm doing right now, which is pretty interesting too. So I'm born and raised in Taiwan, and I started my first business when I was college. So that was a music studio in a local college town. So during that time, that was 2009, 2010, like the social media start merging. That was my first taste of the startup world. Super excited.
I'm going to ask one really fully tangential question, but so what part of Taiwan were you in?
Oh, the city called Tainan. So it's a southern Taiwan, but
all right. So we're on opposite ends. So I lived in the Taipei area for a couple of years in Taiwan. So just was curious.
Oh, that's my hometown actually.
Okay, yeah. So I served for those that don't know if I mentioned on the podcast before. I served a religious mission for my church, and so I was in Taiwan and Taidong and Guangshan and all over that area for a bit of time. So just was curious if what areas that were of common. Nice. Anyway, we won't digress too long. So anyway, back to your journey. So you were in Taiwan and pick up from there.
Yeah. So I started the first business that was a music studio in the local town, in a college town. So that was the first taste. I really love it. And 3 years later, I do feel like I need to challenge myself. So I sold my share and then moved to US, study another engineering degree. And that's how I get my first job in Silicon Valley. That's Philips. The company is called NXP Semiconductor. It's funded by Philips. So I was a hardware engineer during that time. So it's a big corporation. I joined. We have a really good team, good boss. But the first 6 months, I realized this is not the lifestyle I'm looking for. So I started working on some side projects. So in the next 3 years, I worked like 4 side projects and start learning software development all by myself, and then create several projects. It didn't really take off. It was a mess. It was failure.
One question, and I know I don't mean to interrupt your journey all the time.
No.
But, so you say that it's not the lifestyle. Is it, hey, I don't like, is it the number of hours you're working? You didn't like the big business. You wanted to be in control. There's a lot of, when people say lifestyle, I'm curious which kind of, what the lifestyle was thing that you wanted.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the problem for me is I feel like I dedicate 8 hours to NXP compared with the 8 hours I spend in my music studio. I feel like my energy are completely different. So I was super passionate every day, was so excited when I do in the music industry. In the same time, I mean, NXP is a great company, so I really enjoy the environment, but I don't feel the same passion I had So I think that was my problem during that time.
Okay, no, I'm just curious because people lifestyle means a lot of different things. So I'm just curious what it meant for you. So anyway, so you
Right.
started your side projects as you was working for
Yeah.
for Philips.
It didn't work for the first three projects, and the fourth project that was during that time, that was 2014. So during that time, like, you know, people are talking about machine learning, start talking about that. So I also dive into it, and I create a machine learning platform, and I create a small demo. I back to music again, so I create a music recommendation engine that using machine learning technology. So basically, you took a photo. Based on the photo, I recommend you the music. So if you're in the beach, I can recommend you some chilling music, stuff like that. And I took this ad, you know, and then presented in a meetup event in San Francisco, showing to people. Interesting enough, there is one Japanese company saw it. They are not interested in the music part at all, but they say, hey, this machine learning technology is pretty cool. So we're talking about utilizing that machine learning technology in their business. So we actually signed a contract. So during that time, I have two jobs. So I have a daytime job and nighttime job during that time. And then I get a second project, third project. They're all in Japan, actually. So that was the time I said, you know what? Maybe it's a time to make a decision. So I quit my job and I just moved to Tokyo. And yeah, so interesting enough, it's like when I was there, I realized the other part is I doing that business for 2 years and realized it turns out become a consulting services. So it's really hard to scale up. Like my dream is kind of have a product company, right? Like, you know, every startup person like really want that too. I mean,
Sure.
yeah, so it turns out to be a consulting services. So I was looking for the chance to productize it, the idea, inspiration. And then I met the big company here in Seattle, and they are doing the business in commercial building. So that was my first time in that space. And I realized, wow, this is super interesting because the infrastructure is so ready. They have a great data collection stuff, all this, you know, the infrastructure. So during that time, we proposed an first idea, kind of like initial of Roby. Yeah.
So I'm going to jump in one question. So you were in US working for Philips, decided it wasn't your lifestyle, right? Didn't want to do something different. Started a few startups that failed, but then you did land on one that the Japanese company was interested in. So you moved to Japan and then did that for a bit of time. And what made you decide to jump, you know, so what made you decide to leave the Japan company and come back to Seattle?
Yeah, so we actually met the contact person. So during that time, I still have a lot of friends in US. So that was a vacation time. I back to US just visiting my friends, and I got introduced to a company in Seattle. So have a conversation with them. And then I realized, wow, this is interesting space. You know, there's a chance I could, you know, productize what I do. And yeah, that's what, you know, and then in the end, we proposed the idea, say, why don't we use our technology to improve the occupant comfort? Because, you know, in a building, you will be able to control like HVAC, lighting, and all that. And that really resonated customer. They say, yeah, this is a cool idea. We really love it. And then we signed a contract. And then that was the chance I feel like, okay, this is a chance I can productize this. So I decided to move back to US just for that.
How did you leave or quit or whatnot from the Japanese company that you were working with the AI? And that was, so I think you said it was growing and it was doing reasonably well. So how did you make that transition or let them know, hey, I'm going to go back to Seattle, have a good one type of thing? Or how did you make that transition?
I think that's it's gradually doing that. It's not like one day say, guys, I'm quit. But in the same time, I think that's a good lesson learned for me. In the end of the day, the startup, you need to make a tough choice to say, okay, this is what I want. I know in the past there's some good time, whatever it is. But yeah, so we gradually tell the customer, say, hey, the company switched to the focus to be more trying to be productized. And then so we kind of finish up the project, but we didn't continue anymore. Just, you know, setting up, say, okay, we've done this project, but that's it. We are not supporting anymore. So gradually shifting. So we closed about 4 or 5 projects in the end, and then I moved to US. for that.
Okay, no, it makes sense. So it wasn't just one day I said, "Hey, I'm going to move to the U.S. Have a good one." You wound it up. You completed the projects and transitioned over. So now you do that. You
Yeah,
said, okay, I'm coming back to the U.S. You made that connection, and
yeah,
that's kind of I think where you said. And if I remember when we talked a little bit before, you had what you called Roby or pre-Roby type of thing. You've been working
yeah,
on a lot of the technology, and you're
yeah,
kind of looking for what is a good application for this? How do we scale it? Where does it
yeah.
fit? And that's where this kind of opportunity came along. Is that about right?
That's right. That's right. And then because after that customer, we interview about another 40 companies. We try to understand what other challenges they have in terms of office operation. And then we realize that, oh, wow, this is a huge opportunity because everybody have a similar common problem and issues, and then that's where we say, okay, that's productize and focus on this, solving this problem. Yes, that's how we create Roby. Yeah.
So one thing that we talked a little bit before, but you didn't bring up or mention was, and I asked you this before, is, maybe dive in a little bit. So you met, I think you said you met the president of Honeywell, but it was kind of an interesting meeting, or you met him on a plane, coworker met him on a plane. So maybe provide a bit of how you made that connection with Roby.
Yeah.
How you pitched it, but how you made the original connection.
Yeah, so the that is the president of I should say general manager of the Allerton brand, the Honeywell brand called Allerton. So they are basically a building automation system. They provide all this commercial building stuff. Yeah, so our previous coworker met the general manager on the airplane, and then they talking about the idea and all that, and then eventually I fly over to US, and then I go to Seattle and pitch to him about the idea. So that's how it get started. So that's kind of like coincidentally found this area. It's kind of interesting. Yeah.
No, I think that isn't, but I think it's a good example of you always should be looking for opportunities, always be pitching, always be sharing, because you never know when you're going to make the connections and who's going to find that interesting. So I think as a startup or someone that wants to do startup, take advantage of every opportunity to share it with people, as opposed to, as opposed to passing by those opportunities and never taking advantage of them.
That's right. I think that's the huge lesson learned was like that as well. And also like, when we decided to do something, kind of embrace that kind of scary moment, say, hey, we got to do the big change, all the time, be comfortable with that. Eventually it benefit, to us, to the company.
No, I think that makes perfect sense. So now you do that, you make the pitch, you land the sale, you get the company going. So how did that then transition go? Was it, hey, we made the pitch, now we're fully funded, and we're making lots of money? Was it still a struggle? Was it still figuring out how to apply it? Are you still there, or kind of how has that gone for you?
It was struggle, actually. It was big lesson as well. So we signed a contract with a big company, but also during that time we are not well funded yet. So means like the cash flow is still low. And one of the things like working with corporation is they're relatively slower than startup. So that means your cash flow are always the issues. And yeah, so that was like a big lesson learned, because like the mindset would be like, this is it, you know what I mean? We signed this contract, this is it, we should be fine, we should be safe, but it's not really that. It actually take more time than we thought. But we were lucky enough. So during that time we apply TechStart program. So we will be able to, and then we actually get into the TechStart program. So that was the turning point of the company, not just about the network, but also because the attention we got. So we will be able to get funded. And not only that, because TechStart also helping us quite a bit in terms of like iterating the strategy, go to market, how do you operate a startup. So after that 3 months program, yeah, things getting much smoother. We're solving a lot of issues on there.
Awesome. So you take that, finally got the funding, you found the company, you found the place for Roby, all that, you figured out, got that all in place. So what do you think, you take the next 6 to 12 months, kind of what is the trajectory, what's the plan, what are you hoping to accomplish?
So this is the interesting part, because pandemic happened. So that means like a lot of enterprises, especially in US, pretty much closed down at this point. So our enterprise sales in the US actually slowed down a lot. But interesting enough, because the international market is gradually open, so we actually get a lot of traction in Japan. So I got to back to Japan again, kind of, sort of. So yeah, so the next milestone for us is like really proving that this is what I have seen so far, because the post-pandemic, the company forced in looking for the new solution in the office. That's kind of the opportunity we have now. So it means like I need to prove that we are repeating this process. We will be able to close the first big deal in Japan last month, but now we need to prove that that's repeatable business. So in the next, like, 6 to 12 months, I pretty much prove the investor or people around us say this is a scalable business.
Okay, no, I think that makes sense. Yeah. That's a lot of times. There's a difference where you start out with proof of concept, then you get a prototype, you try it out once, and it's always easier to land a second class customer after you land the first one, right? I think that's always the hardest thing, is to land that first customer. But you also have to make sure that now as you use that first customer to repeat it with other customers, that you actually prove it out, right? So you actually show, hey, that we've delivered on what we promised for the first customer. Now you should buy our product, so to speak.
That's right. And then like with limited customization as well, because a lot of enterprise customer will require that. But how do you really find like the common problem space that minimize your customization? I think that's another really interesting part for us.
No, I agree. And that's one that can be hard, especially on the enterprise. A lot of times everybody wants it just for them, and you have to either decide I'm not going to customize it and they're just going to have to accept what's out of the box, or you have to figure out what is that pricing model. How can you not lose your shirt, so to speak, or not lose money by customizing it every time? So it's a fine balance. Sometimes customization you can make a good profit on. Other times, if you don't quote it right, you think it's going to be easier or quicker or simpler, then you a lot of money. So I think that's a good lesson as well.
Yeah.
So then why don't we now, then we'll jump to I always have 2 questions I ask towards the end of the podcast. So we'll jump to those now. So the first question I always ask is, so what was your worst business decision you ever made?
So yeah, I listen to your podcast. This is actually my favorite part. So I'm the first time founder. So basically means like I don't have much experience. That means like in every area possible, I made a lot of mistakes. And then, so I'm talking about business focus, go-to-market strategy, product iteration, even manage the company, how to create the company culture, all of that, I make a huge mistake. So it's hard to say which one is the worst. However, summarize all this, I think the biggest mistake I made is I did not create the environment I can learn fast. So which means like, for example, for me as first time founder, first time I get funded, you got advisor, you got investor, they always, they trying to help out. They give you a lot of advice, but I didn't have the knowledge to know like how to filter it out and how do I communicate with them if I disagree with them, right? So I try to please everybody, and turns out your solution is always in a middle ground. Always the middle ground idea is always not the best one usually. So overall speaking, that kind of is a summarize, like I think the biggest mistake I made.
No, and I think that's a good point. I mean, some things you're saying, hey, this really doesn't matter. It's inconsequential. We'll just make a concession because it keeps investors or keeps a client happy. But to your point on other things, if you're always compromising, then you slowly, you always find slowly your product is changing or out of control or is going in a different direction than what you envisioned or what is best. And it's because you're always, making those little tweaks and changes, and it's kind of death by 1,000 cuts. So I think that's a good lesson, is to sometimes you agree, sometimes you concede, but you need to know when to stand up, when to not concede, and when you say, no, this is a bad idea, and we need to stick with what we're doing. So I think that's a good mistake learned, but a good lesson learned. So, okay, now we'll go to the second question, which is, so now you're talking to someone that's just getting into startups or a small business. What would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Focus on lessons learned. So this is the biggest lessons learned I learned. When you focus on learning, not only you grow yourself, you also grow your team, and then eventually that will grow the business. That will the one piece of advice I would give it.
No, and I think that even having that culture of, hey, everybody needs to be learning, improving, and becoming better is something that is a much better company culture. If you just get stagnant and people think, hey, we already know everything, we're not going to do anything new, we don't need to worry about it, that's when you oftentimes get eclipsed by people that are learning new things and are doing something different. So I think that's a great lesson. Well, as we wrap up, people want to reach out to you. They want to connect up, whether it's learn more about your company, they're in enterprise, they want to be a customer, they want to be an investor, or just want to learn more about you. What's the best way to connect up with you?
Just email me. So my email is j@tellroby, tellroby.com. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's easy enough. So certainly if people want to reach out, make connections, or learn more, email Jay at j@tellroby.com, and I'm sure he'll be happy to talk with you about anything.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure. Now, for those of you that are listeners that have your own journey to tell, if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the podcast, feel free to go to inventivejourneyguest.com and apply to be on. If you're a listener, make sure to click subscribe so you get notifications of this podcast and all the new ones as they air. And lastly, if you ever need help with patents and trademarks, feel free to reach out to us at Miller IP Law, and we're always here to help. Well, Jay, thank you again for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
I wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.